Good afternoon. Welcome back here at ECCMID TV. My name is Judith Cohen. I will be your anchor woman the ECCMID TV broadcasts. I'm very happy to announce my next guest who has just joined me here in the TV studio. This is Professor Scott Hultgren, who is a professor of molecular microbiology at the Washington University in St. Louis, United States of America. Very warm welcome to you. You are one of this year's ECCMID keynote speakers. So I would love to hear a little bit more about your keynote lecture that I believe is going to be tomorrow, right?
That's right.
Yeah, but first I think you you spoke this morning at the very beginning of this year's ECCMID during a symposium, right, on urinary tract infections?
I monitored the session.
Yeah. Oh, you monitored the
session.
Yeah. Would you care to share a little bit more about the content of that? Because it was on urinary tract infections,
That's
which
right.
is one of your personal spear points, I think.
These were clinicians looking at how to treat urinary tract infections with antibiotics or with alternative sources. So they were talking about recurrent UTI, which is a huge problem. There's about 15 million cases of UTI in the United States every year, and about 10% of those go on to develop chronic recurrent UTIs, and that's a big problem.
Yeah.
That's a decrease in quality of life. And you know, antibiotics aren't working for these. They keep getting the infection. So, we talked about that. We talked about catheter-associated infections, which are a huge problem. Hospital-associated infections are a huge problem. You go to the hospital to get a miracle cure for your heart or lung or something, and you get an infection in the hospital and die.
Yeah.
In the U.S., there's 100,000 deaths per year. I mean, that's tragic. You go in for something and die because you got sick in the hospital.
Yeah.
So those are the things that first symposium was about.
So antimicrobial resistance is a big topic,
Right.
and large on the agenda this year in ECCMID. Is it also with the recurrent UTIs and the antibiotics that are being used for that indication? Is that contributing to AMR problems?
Oh, that's a great question. So I think it is because for example, 15% of all antibiotics used in the United States are to treat UTI.
Yeah.
And most UTIs are in women. So you're just pumping all of these antibiotics into the gut, where your gut microbiota is, which is a microbial organ, which has many functions in maintaining health and protecting the body from invading pathogens like uropathogenic E. coli.
Yeah.
So antibiotics, treatment with antibiotics is going to increase antibiotic resistance. And it also is going to affect the gut microbiota and the function of that microbiota. Yeah. And in fact, treatment with antibiotics is a risk factor for UTI. So there's a vicious cycle, because the ultimate reservoir for uropathogenic E. coli is the gut.
Yeah.
So the antibiotic is going to suppress the microbiota and allow UPEC to get back in the gut and bloom and re-access the urinary. So it's a vicious cycle that needs to be broken.
And what do you believe is the largest challenge, like finding different types of antibiotics that will be more, or different sustainable solutions, like very different therapeutic treatments?
Yeah.
Because I know that's something that you've done a lot of research in and developed also. Yeah,
so in my opinion, we are putting a major effort into trying to develop what I call antibiotic-sparing therapeutics. Yeah. So molecules that maybe target the way these bugs cause disease. For example, they have to attach to the bladder to be able to stick and without getting washed out by the urine. So targeting those kinds of things that are important in the life cycle of UPEC, I believe is a great idea. We actually
so you're not trying to kill the bug, but you're trying to prevent the bug from getting you sick.
Because if you, with this particular molecule that we've been developing, it binds to, it prevents attachment. And so what happens? Well, the bacteria get flushed down in the toilet, and they love it down there. So it's not a huge selection. It's not, in my view, it's not like this molecule is going to build up the type of resistance like antibiotics do, which kill bacteria.
Yeah. So, and how far is this research? Are there already antibiotic-sparing therapeutics on market?
Yeah. So we worked on this for a long time, and then formed a little company, and then we had the great pleasure to hook up with GSK, GlaxoSmithKline. So GlaxoSmithKline has now taken over the development of these molecules, and they are advancing them into the clinic, and they're currently in phase 1B human trials.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's progressing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and this, no, not this afternoon, tomorrow afternoon, you will be giving your keynote lecture. We've all seen the large banners over the registration area.
I should have worn a hat.
Yeah. Now everyone will recognize you now here at ECCMID. So your keynote lecture is also on UTI, from fundamental bench science to translatable therapeutics. So is this addressing the same topic that we just discussed, or
Yes.
are you giving the audience more?
No, they'll get a little more. For example, we're also developing a vaccine,
Yeah.
also targeting the protein the bacteria uses to colonize the bladder.
Okay.
And that is going into phase 2 human clinical trials. The phase 1A, 1B were very promising. They showed about 70 to 80% reduction in recurrent UTIs. The FDA was so pleased with this that compassionate use has been allowed by the FDA for patients suffering from multi-drug.
But if you develop a vaccine, that's for one pathogen only, or?
It's true, but E. coli causes over about 90% of UTIs,
Yeah.
so that's a pretty good.
So if you get that one out.
Right. And some of the
getting
other
somewhere.
causes are also gram negatives that attach in the same way.
Okay.
So the drugs would also presumably or hopefully also target those.
Yeah. So this is already also in phase.
That one is
Two?
in going into phase 2. Yeah.
Wow. So what are your hopes or expectations for recurrent urinary tract infections in, let's say, 5 years? Where will we be? Where will we stand?
Okay, so I think of UTI as a spectrum of diseases. The acute, self-limiting, which is easy to treat with antibiotics, to these chronic recurrence, which I think is a syndrome. We analyzed the gut microbiomes with metagenomics of women suffering from chronic recurrent UTI and found that they have a reduced complexity of their microbiota. In other words, less strains. So, which translates to unhealthy conditions where the microbiota is not able to perform some of its functions and not able to perform this colonization resistance function. So we see in this study, all the women who had a history of recurrent UTI had this phenomenon. So I would like to bring all of this together and think about ways of repairing the microbiota, because that's the ultimate reservoir. If we can target the reservoir, I would argue we could, reduce the rate of recurrences, which I think some of these molecules we're developing will do, like these anti-adhesive molecules. We're also learning that an infection can leave an epigenetic imprint on the bladder mucosa. So these are changes to the DNA, methylation and accessibility regions. And so when you look at mice that have had a history of UTI, and then treated with antibiotics or naive, there are hundreds of, even after weeks and weeks and months, there's hundreds of different differential gene expression and protein expression. So in these mice with a history of UTI, they seem to be plugged in to the immune system in a way that when E. coli gets back into the bladder, it activates this overexuberant inflammatory response, and it allows unchecked bacterial replication. So I want to be able to see us attack all of these problems that we're learning from how the bug causes disease and fix it.
Well, start with the understanding. Well, that makes a lot of sense, right?
Right.
So if you say there's like epigenetic changes occurring, there are changes in the DNA, the methylation. Is that can that pass over through generations? That the same flaw in the DNA
That's
is
a great
present?
question. I don't know the answer to that, but
Is it likely?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. UTIs are genetic. So if the mother has UTIs, the daughter often suffers from UTIs. Okay. I don't know what that is due to.
No.
I mean, it could be multifactorial, but who knows? I don't know if that could be passed or not.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting.
Yeah.
So it's really getting the insights in the fundamentals of urinary tract infections, after which you can go to the translatable.
Right, right.
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting.
Right.
So that's tomorrow, Sunday, from 4:15 to 5:15, right? In
Yep.
Hall A. So that's for our viewers who want to hear a lot more. I think this interview was already a great teaser towards this keynote lecture.
Awesome.
I hope all of you will be watching. I would like to thank you for taking your time in your very busy ECCMID schedule to join us and
it's
give
my
us
pleasure.
a little teaser. For all our viewers, thank you for watching. We will be back at 2:00, and we will be back with one of the ESCCMID Executive Committee members. This time the Treasurer, Financial Support Officer, and he will talk a little bit more about one of the grants, the Förderverein grant. So stay tuned, tune in again at 2 if you want to learn more about that. We will see you then.